tough people. They're bad people. We don't want them in our country. We can't let a judge say that he wants them. You know, he didn't run for president.
What you're seeing in the Trump administration with their attacks on the media, their attacks on the court, they're trying to usurp the powers of Congress. They're moving us toward an authoritarian society.
Now we have the F-47, which sends a very direct, clear message to our allies that we're not going anywhere.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, demands for and from the Department of Justice. A federal district judge who temporarily blocked the Trump administration's deportation flights holds a contentious hearing as lawyers from the Justice Department, are grilled almost from the very beginning on what they knew about the flights and why they ignored his order to turn them around. Also, future fighter jet President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the Air Force's newest aircraft. It's called the F-47, which the Pentagon says will have a longer range and more advanced stealth capabilities.
This is a gift to my kids and your kids, to my grandkids and your grandkids. This is a historic investment in the American military, in the American industrial base, in American industry that will help revive the warrior ethos.
Also, Elon Musk at the Pentagon, as President Trump denied a report that is to say Musk was going to be briefed on the U.S. military's top secret plan for a potential war with China. We'll have more on that in just a second. I want to begin tonight with Jake Rosen, who joins me here at the desk. Jake, you were witnessing, not in the courtroom, but adjacent to it in the media room, this very contentious hearing. Walk us through what happened, the basics.
Well, that's right, Major. At the top of this hearing, after a week of this kind of ping-pong back and forth of court filings, President Trump, Elon Musk, all getting involved, calling for this judge's ouster. He called a Department of Justice attorney right in front of him off the top of the hearing and said, on Saturday night, when this whole saga started, did you understand my order verbally in court to say, and did you relay it then to the government, that I wanted these two planes carrying alleged Tren de Aragua gang members turned around? The attorney said yes, and then he asked, did you go and tell the government? He said yes. Again, this is at the root of this entire back and forth, in which the government has not provided any information outside of when those planes left U.S. airspace, because they claim once they left U.S. airspace, the judge's decision hadn't been officially put into writing in the court docket, and therefore he had no decision or no ability to turn those planes around.
And it wasn't, if not invalid, it wasn't operationally significant that the planes had left and they were going to go to El Salvador, no matter what.
Yeah, and that the president has authorities outside in his military capacity to order a military plane wherever he wants it, whenever he wants it.
It's also been said this week, you were mentioning this back and forth, and President Trump and Elon Musk, there is some suggestion out there that this federal district judge wanted to release the Venezuelans in question. Did the judge address that?
Yeah, and it was the second point. After he called this lawyer, Drew Ensign, up, he said, I would like to make something clear for the record. And he asked Mr. Ensign, do you understand it that I did not, in my order on Saturday night, order any release of any alleged Tren de Aragua or other gang members out onto the streets? And he said, yes, that has not happened. Then he said, did you also understand it that I have not ordered to stop any of these other machinations around this that have been alleged, that there were a broader pause on these deportations generally, because that has been put out there by the president, that Donald Trump has said even earlier today, saying that he believes that this judge wants to stop all deportations. That's not true. The judge said out loud that these deportations outside of the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act may continue.
And where do things stand now?
Right now, going into Monday, as of 5 p.m., there will be an appeals court hearing on Monday to appeal this judge, James Boasberg's original order on Saturday, in which he blocked these deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members. The second step is he's deciding whether or not to tailor his temporary restraining order to potentially allow people who are in the U.S. illegally and who are Tren de Aragua gang members to say, if they are detained, I am a gang member and I would like to be deported. I'm not going to contest this. His order right now currently blocks any deportations of people who currently may admit to being a gang member. So he's going to potentially look at that. He's also going to take further steps and ask for a briefing potentially on what the government and what the plaintiffs believe is going on in terms of vetting these people. As we've reported all week to make sure that the people who the government has already deported and to make sure the people who the government plans on deporting, of which there are over 250 people, to make sure that there are either administrative steps or legal steps taken to make sure that it's not just a broad accusation that, hey, you might be a gang member, therefore you're gone, to make sure there are proven steps that these people are A, Venezuelan, B, over the age of 13, and C, actually parts of the gang, not just potentially affiliated on the fringes with the gang.
Cenk Rosen, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. I want to bring in Charlie Daggett, who joins us from the Pentagon. Charlie, always great to see you. Let's start with the story that got a lot of attention yesterday late. New York Times, Wall Street Journal saying that when Elon Musk came this morning to the Pentagon, he was going to be read in or briefed in some manner or form on a top secret potential war plan for China. What do we know about that?
Major, to be honest, it's been a frenetic day here at the Pentagon, yet another frenetic day. So Elon Musk arrived around 9 a.m. He left at 10:20. He met directly with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. But even before he arrived, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell furiously denied that Musk was going to be briefed on China, even going so far as to demand that the New York Times retract that story. But here's where it gets even murkier. Musk was invited to discuss innovation and technology, right? So we both know he's got multiple defense contracts here. Stands to reason that China would come up in those discussions. The New York Times story suggests that Musk was briefed on classified information regarding China, specifically what the military calls O plans or operational plans, and that includes top secret slides, potential targets, etc. And Musk has skin in the game, both here at the DoD, where billions of taxpayer dollars are going into his programs, including SpaceX that we know about, but he's also heavily invested in China. So every single source that I spoke to today said Musk did not have any classified briefings on China. As you said, President Trump and Hegseth repeated those assertions. Now, whether he was originally planned to sit in on those classified briefings and then maybe they modified it after that story broke, we don't know, or they won't say.
Days are true at the Pentagon, lots of different parts of Washington and the rest of the country. Charlie, we all do sympathize with that. Talk to our audience about the F-47. What do we know? How long has it been in development? And do we know anything at all about how much it might cost per unit?
Okay, well, first of all, no prizes for guessing why it was called the F-47. It might just be, that might just be a happy accident.
Patently obvious.
It might just be a happy accident that coincides with the 47th president of the United States. The president just called it a beautiful number. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declined to comment. But anyway, it's been called by President Trump as the most advanced, capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. Interestingly, he said it can operate alongside drones because that's the next stage technology. And the Air Force, we spoke to them today, they kind of echoed that. It's supposed to be, I'm using military terms here, adaptable and collaborative combat aircraft. So it's built to adapt is the way they describe it. So it's obviously top secret, but stealth, long-range strike capabilities, adaptable. It's the next step forward from the F-22 fighter jet. It's been called a generational leap forward. And actually, that's not much of an exaggeration because we're almost looking at a generation since the last fighter jet. It's obviously got air-to-ground capabilities, but it also has air-to-air capabilities, which is vital in any kind of dogfight scenario with China. And officials confirm, yes, it's been 5 years in development. That includes a pause under the Biden administration where, as it's been explained to me, they reevaluated it in terms of cost and relevance. And as far as delivery goes, the Air Force, and Boeing for that matter, obviously, have promised that the F-47 will fly during President Trump's administration. The first phase obviously includes integrating and testing all of the platforms. They're going to produce a small number of test aircraft. Ultimately, in terms of cost, estimates around $20 billion, each aircraft costing roughly $300 million once production is up and running.
Wow, that's a very big number. Charlie Daggett with all the details. Thanks so very much. A bill aimed at protecting federal workers released or fired by the Department of Government Efficiency has, in the House of Representatives, some GOP support. Colorado Republican Congressman Jeff Hurd is one of them, and will join us next to explain why, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. A Fox News poll of pretty recent vintage finds a majority of voters disapprove of Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency's efforts to dramatically and rapidly reduce the size of the federal workforce. Here are the numbers. 58% disapprove, 40% approve. Colorado Republican Congressman Jeff Hurd joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. How do you interpret that poll data?
Major, it's great to see you. I think the important thing from my perspective is I think most people in my district support the idea of government efficiency. It's something I certainly support. Talk to the people that work in the federal bureaucracy. They will tell you there are cuts to be made. The key thing is that we make them in the right spots. And so one of the concerns I've heard from my constituents and from people that are in my district is that we're maybe cutting the people that are on the ground. We should be focused more on the middle layer, the kind of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and making sure that we make those cuts in the right spot.
Western slope of Colorado is your district. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management employees, both in your district. Are they afraid? Are they being hurt already?
We have seen a number of cuts in our district. We have 6 national forests in Colorado. My district covers not just Western Colorado, but Southern Colorado as well. Some of the cuts that we're seeing are kind of at the lower level, the people that are on the ground, the boots on the ground, that are doing the work, maintaining our trails, managing the forest, protecting our watersheds. And I think it's important that folks recognize that there are efficiencies to be made, but we just need to make them in the right spot. It's not the people that are on the ground. It's the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. that we need to be cutting.
So do you have any hope, Congressman, of reversing this trend? Because if the boots aren't on the ground late spring and summer, that's going to materially affect the ability of those parks to function and the tourist dollars that come with it.
Certainly, it's something that's of concern to us, particularly with fire season coming. We've had kind of a dry winter here in Colorado. It's something we're always keeping our eyes on here in the West. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to see some of those individuals come back, some of those probationary employees rehired, once we recognize how critically important they are, and we're talking with the administration, making sure that we have the right people in the right places. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can get that done before too long.
And you have legislation for probationary employees brought back into the federal workforce, do you not?
That's right, Major. It's a bipartisan bill that's been introduced in the House that would make sure that individuals who've been separated from employment, if they come back, they do not lose their probationary status. They essentially get to be right where they were before they left federal government service. And it's something that we want to make sure it's common sense that when people come back, that they don't lose their place in line.
It is bipartisan, as you mentioned, Congressman, but the vast majority of co-signers are Democrats. Do you have any hope? Have you got any signals from the Republican leadership that that bill will be given a serious hearing and might make it to the floor?
Well, I think yes, there certainly are more Democrats than Republicans, but I think leadership recognizes, the administration recognizes the importance of protecting the employees that are actually getting work done. Yes, we need to cut the bureaucracy. Yes, we need to get those bureaucrats out of Washington, D.C. But when we make those cuts, we need to do them in the right spot. And when we rehire those employees, I'm confident that the administration, that Republican leadership will see the importance of protecting those employees who are actually getting the work done and delivering the services that we here in Colorado and across the West need and rely on.
Congressman, you've talked a little bit about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin and Russia. Give me your evaluation of the last 2 weeks in Trump White House conversations to obtain first a limited ceasefire and then possibly something approximating a full-blown deal.
Well, certainly I support peace in Ukraine, but I would say that it's important that we stand against Russia. It's something that I take very seriously, and we need to make sure that we're supporting our Ukrainian allies against the Russian autocracy, and it's something that I've been clear on for sure, and certainly in my communications with my constituents, with those that are concerned and reaching out to me, I'm saying that we need to stand against Putin and against the totalitarian autocracy that is Russia.
Do you wish President Trump used some of the words you just used to describe either Putin or the Russian government?
Well, I think the president certainly has a style, and I'm optimistic that we're going to get to a place where we do have a peace that is effective. My perspective is I'm going to speak my mind, and I know the president has a role that he's working through. And, I'm not afraid to say my position and be clear about it. But ultimately, this will be something that's going to be decided much higher than here in the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado.
One thing that's also on your mind is preservation of the Biden-era clean energy tax credits. To what degree do you think the Trump administration will be supportive of that?
Well, I think we need to take a scalpel when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of the Green New Deal stuff, we got to get rid of it. It's terrible. subsidies, those sorts of things, they're not good. They don't move the economy forward. They're not good for hardworking Americans who are struggling to pay their electric bills, their gas bills, fill up their gasoline in their cars, keep grocery prices low. But there are certain thoughtful tax credits that I think will advance our economy, will advance the president's goal of energy dominance. Renewables do have a role in that, and I speak as somebody that has a district that has quite a bit of carbon-based, natural gas, oil. Absolutely supportive of that, uranium as well, nuclear. But renewables do have a role, and so preserving some of those tax credits strategically, I think, is the right thing to do.
Do you think the administration will do that?
I'm confident that they will. There's certainly some Republicans in Congress that recognize the importance of that, me and a number of my other colleagues. And I think that the administration recognizes that if we're really, truly going to advance President Trump's goal of energy dominance, that renewables should be an important part of that mix.
Republican Colorado Congressman Jeff Hurd, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Garrett. Talk to you soon.
So is the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, just a modern version of the Clinton-era Reinventing Government initiative? When we come back, Robert Costa will join me to talk about that cost-cutting era of the 1990s, though I promise you we will not try to revive any of the so-called fashion trends of that era. That's next. You're watching America Decides.
Does this work? Is it changing people's lives for the better? Can we say, after we take money and put it into a certain endeavor, that it was worth actually having it away from the taxpayers?
That was Bill Clinton, president back then, asking some pretty probing questions about government efficiency and his efforts at reinventing government. That's what they call it. It was an initiative that flowed through his entire administration, both terms, that did, in fact, reduce the size of the federal workforce by about 429,000 employees. Now, that might seem, at first glance, similar to what Elon Musk is up to. But the administrator of that Clinton-era program tells our Robert Costa that DOGE is going about it the wrong way.
There's a total lack of transparency. We don't know who they're cutting. There's no rationale for why they're cutting. They're saying these people are wasteful. What do you mean? What are they doing that is a waste of taxpayers' money? We've gotten none of this. This is just a sort of slash and burn exercise.
Robert Costa joins me now. That's kind of the point, the slash and burn part of it, to do it rapidly, to do it in public, and to do it with people in Washington and lots of other agencies to be freaked out. The Trump White House wants that absorbed by the public at large and specifically Trump supporters.
That's exactly right, Major. In terms of the idea, there is an overlap between what happened in the early 1990s, and you've documented it so well in your own reporting in your book, The Enduring Revolution. There was an impetus in both parties in the early 90s to shrink the federal government. Why? There was a belief
and to modernize it and make it more tech-savvy, if possible.
That's exactly right. It was during the dawn of the internet age, and there was a belief that government could be reformed, overhauled, and made smaller. What's different now with Elon Musk, as we've covered at CBS, and I've spent some time at Sunday Morning doing this, is the method. The method of Elon Musk is so different than what we saw with Elaine K. Mark and the Clinton administration. And it's even different than what we saw with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his efforts in 1995 to really disrupt the federal government. You see now the executive branch acting in a much more aggressive way. In the 1990s, there was a belief that the norms still mattered, that you wanted to have kind of this blue ribbon commission, this initiative, you wanted to go through Congress.
Have these things flow through Congress, the workforce reductions through attrition, not filling positions, letting things sort of atrophy on their own without taking the symbolic or actual chainsaw to the federal workforce right off the jump.
And this is built on what happened in the 1990s. Part of the fun of doing the reporting on this piece is to remember what you and I have discussed for a long time, that 1992, 1994, the echoes of those moments in American politics still matter now. The outsider ethos of Buchanan and Perot in 1992. And then in 1994, 1995, Newt Gingrich said, we're going to turn over the table of government. And you can trace what's happening now with Musk and President Trump to what happened then. But you see now Trump and his allies empowered because they believe they have a mandate from the election, and they have this foundation in the Republican Party that they're ready to move in this direction.
And you spoke to former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who remains close to President Trump and many in the Trump White House. Let's listen.
One of the virtues of being as wealthy as he is he hardly needs to rig the game.
But who has oversight then over Musk at this point?
Donald J. Trump.
That's it.
He is the chief executive officer of the United States. He was elected by the American people, and he's acting as the president of the United States.
You know, Newt Gingrich told me after the contract with America and everything he went through to try to turn over the table of government in the mid-90s that it was the federal bureaucracy that any successful president who wanted to overturn things in Washington had to attack. He's believed that for decades.
And that has filtered into the Republican Party throughout the country. Why is Elon Musk able to go into USAID and so many other agencies and say, with a broad swipe, you're all up to really, in his view, no good when it comes at least to the budgetary arrangements at a lot of these agencies? Because rhetorically and politically, people like Newt Gingrich have laid the groundwork for Elon Musk to do what he's doing now. And it's intriguing. There is a through line from Gingrich to Trump. In fact, the Wall Street Journal this week has a profile of the head of domestic policy at the White House, someone they say is the most powerful person you've never heard of. His name is Vince Haley. He was Gingrich's longtime political advisor, now a top political advisor for President Trump.
So part of this conversation nationwide, Robert, is some pushback from Democrats and some activism. Some town halls are getting a little bit contentious. And right now, as we speak, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are on the western part of the United States holding some pretty large rallies. What's your perspective and reporting on that?
I believe, as a reporter, it's very important to track what's going on in Colorado today with Representative Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders. Newt Gingrich, Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot, Donald Trump. How are they all the same? They're movement politicians. They galvanize movements of people who are often not very political around their ideas, their campaigns. What's happening now with Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez is a movement on the left. You're seeing frustrations among Democrats in traditional town hall meetings toward elected officials. But you're also seeing growing traction on the left for this argument that Elon Musk and Donald Trump and others close to the president are so-called oligarchs, that billionaires are running the country. And this hasn't captured the whole Democratic Party as an argument they're going to make in 26 or 28, but it's gaining steam. And you have to pay attention to movements when they're drawing thousands of people in this political time where it's really winter, politically speaking. We're years away from the midterms and the next presidential, but you're seeing thousands of people come out for Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez. And it'd be easy to say they're all progressives, they're all just the Bernie people from 15, 16, and 20. But we saw in 16 and 20, Bernie often drew from working people who weren't necessarily involved in politics. So both parties are paying attention.
Your point being energy matters. Keep an eye where you see energy.
That's exactly right.
Robert Costa, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being
Major.
with me. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed late this afternoon that it is conducting mass firings within several branches of that agency, including from the Office for Civil Rights. In a statement, the agency said, quote, DHS remains committed to civil rights protections, but must streamline oversight, end quote. Two other offices within the Department of Homeland Security are also facing layoffs. Democratic and Republican lawmakers, as Robert Costa just discussed with me, are feeling a bit of heat from their constituents during town halls this week. Next, we bring in our political panel to assess that and so much more right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Vermont Democratic Senator or Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, however he describes it, told CBS News what he thinks the Democratic Party needs to do to energize voters. Here's some of what he told my colleague Nydia Cavazos.
Do you believe that leadership right now is doing enough?
I think in general the Democratic Party has not been the kind of party we need to represent the working class of this country in so many ways. There is no reason why we have massive income and wealth inequality, why we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people.
I want to bring in our Democratic political panel. Democrats both, Liza Acevedo and Joel Payne. Liza served as the Director of Communications for former Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff. Joel is a much-beloved CBS News political contributor. He also has a very good day job as a Democratic strategist. Joel, let me start with you. You are joining us from New York. We'll get to Bernie in a second, but there was a story written by another news organization saying that Bidens want to be brought back in the Democratic Party. They're willing to raise money, but they want to also have some visibility. How do you think that's going to go over?
Major, it's good to be with you. Look, I think the Democrats are not in a position to turn away good help from anybody. If Joe Biden wants to raise money go help organize the party
All
behind the scenes.
checks will be accepted. Yes,
and wants to be a good emeritus member of the party in standing. I think that's totally fine. But I don't think this is a moment for top-down leadership in terms of having a all-powerful former president go and guide the party out of the darkness. I think that this is a time for bottom-up leadership. That's why you're seeing so much grassroots energy out there, Major. And so I take this news as that's great. Joe Biden can do that. He can offer a thing to a lot of Democrats. But that's not going to be our path out of the wilderness is behind Joe Biden.
Liza?
Oh, listen, I worked in the Biden administration. I worked at the White House. I have nothing but respect for the Bidens. And I agree with Joel. If the Bidens want to come out and fundraise,
They want to write a check, send it
we'll
along.
take all the help that we can get right now.
But to Joel's other point, the energy's elsewhere.
Oh, I mean, listen, you
to the
brought
degree
up
that
Senator,
there is energy.
You brought up Senator Sanders, right? You know, we're seeing him and AOC traveling across the country. I want to see Democrats out there doing that, right? I want them to build a coalition, to build a movement right now, because that's exactly what we need. We need more people to be involved and engaged in this process, and we need Democrats to frankly unite in this moment, right? How can we make an argument to the American people saying, hey, we're the party that's going to fight for you, when they don't see a united front amongst ourselves?
To that point, Liza, how is it that Democrats can unite after what is perceived by some, certainly House Democrats, as kind of a debacle over the government shutdown and a capitulation by the Democratic leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer?
Walked right into that one, didn't I?
You sure did.
Listen, I have nothing but respect for Senator.
I don't build off-ramps either.
I have nothing but respect for Senator Schumer. I don't envy the position that he was in, right? But I think Democrats, again, they want to see someone fighting for them right now. They want to see individuals who are out there fighting on their behalf. And you know what? We can talk about the Democratic Party night and day all we want to, but we can also talk about the Republican Party, right? We're seeing where is their moral compass at any moment, at any point in time. They're willing to throw it away, right? They're so scared of being primaried that they're willing to say, well, I'm going to vote this way and I'm never going to vote against Donald Trump. They're willing to say, I'll go against judges and the rule of law if that means Elon Musk writing a check to me. So I would also say, what do we think about the Republican Party at this time?
Joe, what do you make of this recess when everyone's out of town and lots of town halls are being conducted either virtually or in person, and there's lots of shouting going on in both directions?
Well, I think that tells you where the energy meter is at the grassroots of the Democratic Party. I just want to go back to one thing. I know you were talking about Leader Schumer, and I guess what I would say is this. I have a background working in Senate leadership, and I think the way that Democrats lost that was expectations got way out over what was possible. And I think that's the lesson to take from that. One is that the expectations got out of step, but then also that when it came time to fight, Democrats needed to be willing to fight over something. They needed to have something, a line in the sand that couldn't be crossed. And I think, tying it to your point about the grassroots energy, what the people out in the field want to see is that there's a strategy and that there's passion and that there's clarity that this moment is not 2017. I heard Leader Schumer talk about how, well, this worked in 2017 and 2018. Respectfully, we are not in 2017 or 2018. The circumstances around Donald Trump are very different. This is a Republican Party that is fully, in his grasp. And I don't think that you can apply all the lessons from 8 years ago to this moment now.
So you both specialize in giving strategic advice and honing a message. So I'm going to ask you both, and I'll start with you, Liza. If you were to try to distill what the Democratic Party should be saying it is fighting for, how would you distill that?
Well, you can't walk away from this moment, right? There's too much out there. There's too much that's at stake on the line. So I think what you're seeing right now where people are going out and talking to individuals, they need to continue to do that. But we also need to be open. But we need to be open, right? Sometimes we live in this bubble where it's just us as Democrats. We need to be open to inviting more people to join that party. And sometimes individuals believe that Democrats are also the party of millionaires and billionaires. We need to make working class Americans know that we're here and that we're going to continue to fight for them and fight for their values. And we need to capitalize on what the Trump administration is doing right now, when they're doing these DOGE cuts. I don't think the message that you're firing thousands of veterans is going to play well when it comes to the midterms. So I think we need to continue to lean into what they're doing.
Joel, your distillation?
A few things. Be a reformer. Acknowledge that, yes, we believe in government. We believe in government that works, but we also believe that government can be and often is broken, and it's not working for the American people. And when that's the case, we'll fix it. Also, be genuine. be a genuine messenger and have a genuine message, you could be AOC or you could be Joe Manchin. If you're genuine and if people believe that what you're saying is from the heart and actually represents who you are and what you represent, people will give you a lot of latitude. And I think we have maybe a little bit too many Democrats that, frankly, listen to people like me, listen to counsel from folks like me and Liza, who I know we like to give good advice. But you should take that advice and you should make it work for you and make it sound like it's coming from the heart. And I think if Democrats are genuine and have a strategy to make government work for people, I think that'll be a way out of this moment that we're in right now.
Joel Payne, for this episode, you get the last word. No disrespect at all.
Oh,
Liza.
never major.
Thank you so very much for being here. Joel, thanks for you. Up next, President Trump has selected a new director of the Federal Aviation Administration. The challenges that new director, if confirmed, might face, among them an air traffic controller shortage and some others. We'll talk about that next right here on America Decides. Welcome back. President Trump has tapped a regional airline CEO. His name is Brian Bedford to lead the Federal Aviation Administration. I want to bring in aviation reporter for Politico, I'll get that right, Oriana Pollack. It's great to have you with us, Oriana. So tell us about Mr. Bedford and what he will face if confirmed as the next FAA administrator.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian Bedford has been with Republic Airways for roughly 30 years or more. I mean, he started there in the 90s. He's grown the airline substantially. And again, a regional airline supplements other big carriers like Delta, United, American with these smaller regional jets. And as of this moment, I think, everyone is eager to see an FAA administrator in there, considering the FAA is dealing with the first major fatal catastrophe at Ronald Reagan in January. Obviously, we know what happened there, and people want to see that rectified. They want to get answers on what happened there. And so he's going to face some tough questions on how, the air traffic system could see upgrades. We've seen Secretary Sean Duffy, the DOT secretary, talk about this at length as well. So how they're going to work together to rectify some of these issues is going to be a very high priority and of high interest on Capitol Hill.
So the shorthand is ATC, air traffic controllers. It's a system, technological system. It's also personnel. Talk to us about challenges in both spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about aging equipment. You're from Cold War era towers from the 1960s in some cases that really need upgrades and really need people fixing a lot of the equipment that you've heard, again, the secretary talk about floppy disks and things that come online very slowly. These are all piecemeal solutions over time that have just been upgraded slowly, have seen not enough funding in many cases. And on the personnel front, it takes about 2 to 3 years to make a proficient air traffic controller, and they want to get people in the door and applying much faster in order to boost the rate of people to try to make net gains over the next 5 years at least to, combat the shortage of about 3,000 people. That's what they're seeing right now. So really, it's a two-pronged thing going on with upgrading and modernizing that technology, as well as getting the people right in the door. How does
Elon Musk fit into that conversation at the Department of Transportation, at the FAA?
As of right now, we're seeing that his SpaceX Starlink satellites that provide internet, it's being tested by the FAA in certain remote parts of Alaska as well as New Jersey to see whether or not some of that could actually complement some of the systems that they have in other control towers and other places where they manage traffic and look at how airplanes fly in the sky, and whether or not there's a moment where they could fill that gap for some satellite coverage where, notoriously like in Alaska, where there isn't that kind of coverage because they can't have the infrastructure there. So that testing is ongoing. They're going to see whether or not it's going to expand. And you've heard Secretary Sean Duffy again talk about where Elon and his engineers will be coming in and providing that advice, and whether they could take that a little bit further.
And right now, it's advice. No contracts yet, but the conversations and the speculation around that and how it might develop continue, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And you've also seen other, agencies, I believe GSA, General Services Administration, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick talk about how Starlink could have some, play there with broadband and what, the general public can use as well. So it's not just DOT that's interested in what Elon Musk can provide, but yes, the DOT is obviously exploring these issues as well.
And Oriana, forgive me if you don't know this, but I read recently about delays at Ronald Reagan National Airport related to changes that were put into effect after, as you mentioned, the fatal collision over that airport in January. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so that was kind of to be expected a little bit as the investigation into the fatal air crash happened. What was going to happen was air traffic controllers were just going to space out aircraft a little bit more to ensure that everything that was changing so rapidly since the crash was maintained well, and they had enough people eyeing all of these flights going in and out of the airport. And we've also seen since the NTSB preliminary report came out that, you know, one of those helicopter routes is now permanently shut. So again, rapid changes happening, rapid recommendations happening, and, you know, air traffic control is going to adhere to some of these recommendations coming out from the FAA.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Oriana Pollock with Politico. Thanks so very, very much.
Thank you.
It's been over 4 months since Election Day, and the race for a North Carolina Supreme Court seat is still unresolved. We'll speak with the incumbent justice about why her challenger is trying to get tens of thousands of ballots in that election thrown out. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. The race for a North Carolina Supreme Court seat from November is still uncertified, the only statewide race in our country still in that category. After several recounts, Democratic Associate Justice Allison Riggs holds a 734-vote lead over Republican State Court of Appeals Judge Jefferson Griffin. But Griffin claims in a lawsuit that some 65,000 ballots were cast not in accordance with state law or the Constitution. Now, a panel from the state's intermediate level appeals court heard arguments about all of that today. North Carolina Supreme Court Associate Justice Allison Riggs joins me now. Justice, it's good to have you with us. We'll get to the legal dispute in a second and the granular nature therein, but I want to ask you, I've read lots of stories about this, and I don't quite understand the remedy. Do lawyers for Jefferson Griffin want all 65,000 votes thrown out? And if they're thrown out, do you rerun the election, or how do you decide who wins? I'm really confused about that.
First, thank you for having me. Counsel for my opponent was asked that very question this morning in oral arguments. And to be clear, they want to toss over 65,000 ballots here in North Carolina. They don't want a new election. They just want to toss 65,000 ballots. And then they believe, because these ballots have been targeted to Democratic counties based on absentee and early voting, they believe that he'll prevail after that. And it doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. And you're not alone in your confusion.
So as I read through the legal arguments, Jefferson Griffin says that the vast majority of these disputed ballots did not have a Social Security or driver's license number attached to the voter registration database. He also challenges military and overseas ballots who didn't provide a photo ID, and what he calls those who never lived in North Carolina, children of people born in North Carolina who live overseas. Now, as I understand it, the Elections Board has said all of these things might have been innocent or in accordance with state law and have already essentially tried to certify this election.
All of these voters cast ballots in compliance with state law. That is crystal clear. Some of my opponents and folks in a certain political party might wish the law was different, but with respect to those voters with allegedly incomplete registrations, the Republican National Committee went to federal court before the election to challenge that, and they lost. So these were the rules in place for the November election. My parents are among the 60,000 people with allegedly incomplete registrations. I promise you my parents are legitimate voters who provided all the information that was requested of them. My father's a 30-year military veteran who registered to vote with his military ID and showed it when he went to vote for me this November. There are also 5,500 military and overseas voters that my opponent has challenged only in 4 Democratic-leaning counties. North Carolina has 100 counties. The people who raised their hands to serve our country in great peril do not deserve to be at the top of the list of people who lose the right to vote because a candidate is disappointed. So these voters did nothing wrong. The NCGOP chair conceded yesterday these voters have done nothing wrong. It's my job as a constitutional officer to enforce and defend our state and federal constitutions no matter what, and I will not give an inch in this fight.
An attorney for Jefferson Griffin said at bottom this case is about whether the election was conducted in accordance with the will of the people. According to the state board, it can conduct an election how it wants. It doesn't matter if the board adopts rules that are inconsistent with state statutes or the state constitution. You just mentioned you're a constitutional officer of the state of North Carolina. How do you respond to that level of argument?
The state law is clear that the children of folks, military members serving abroad who grow up overseas, who might be the children of missionaries on the field, if they turn 18 while they live over there, they are allowed to vote. It is crystal clear. It was also crystal clear that people casting what's called a UACAVA ballot, so military voters, were told explicitly that they did not have to provide a copy of their ID. That's for good reason under federal law, because if you're a submariner, you can imagine you might not have easy access to a copy machine, and the UACAVA portal doesn't even allow you to send it that way. So it's these voters, including my parents, followed every single rule. There are 68,000 people. These are not numbers. This is not correcting a vote count. These are real people who participated in the political process. These are military voters and their families who are going through challenging times, and we should have their back. I'm a sitting judge. There are times when I have to make decisions that I might not personally like. That's my job because I follow the law and apply it neutrally. If we aren't willing to apply the law as written and give voters an assurance that when they come out of the ballot box, if they followed all the rules, they will have confidence that their votes count. This is a critical issue for democracy all across the country.
You just mentioned the critical issue part. What do you think more broadly is at stake with this ongoing legal dispute?
I think this is a continuation of what we've seen in 2020 and 2022, which is making political the way we conduct an election, particularly after the election. If people in power or candidates don't like who the voters choose, rather than conceding graciously, having a peaceful transfer of power, we're seeing a very dangerous trend to, well, let's just fight. If we don't like the election outcome, we'll just argue who won. Now, I'll note Donald Trump won North Carolina. Mine is the only election in which 68,000 voters are at risk of having their ballots tossed. And my opponent hasn't pointed to one example of an illegitimate voter. In fact, these are all eligible voters who cast legal ballots. And that is a rule of law, a foundation of our democracy that needs to be respected across the country. I worry if what my opponent seeks here in North Carolina happens, it's like dropping a match in a very dry forest, and the wildfire will spread rapidly, and we have to guard against that.
North Carolina Supreme Court Associate Justice Allison Riggs, thank you.
Thank you.
That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.